The studio of The View buzzed with its usual morning electricity, lights blazing, cameras swiveling, audience murmuring in half-whispers that carried the tone of anticipation. Blake Shelton hadn't even walked out yet, but the energy in the room already felt different. Producers scurried around with clipboards and headsets, tightening last-minute details, checking angles, double-checking scripts that everyone knew would inevitably be abandoned the moment Joy Behar spotted something she didn't like. Blake stood just off stage, rolling his shoulders like a boxer about to enter the ring. He was used to interviews. He was used to banter. But he also knew Joy Behar's reputation, sharp-tongued, quick-witted, and unafraid to prod guests until something sparked. The crew member next to him offered a sympathetic smile. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as a guy can be for getting roasted before 10 a.m., Blake replied with a dry grin. The stage manager gave the cue. The music hit, the audience cheered, and Blake stepped out into the bright wash of studio light, waving with that easy, laid-back charm he'd perfected over years of television. Joy Behar's smile as he approached the table was wide, too wide, the kind that worn treble was wrapped neatly behind it. The other co-hosts greeted him warmly, pulling him into a hug before he settled into his seat between them. Joy leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table, eyes sizing him up as if he were an opponent she'd studied for weeks. "Blake Shelton," she announced to the audience. "Country royalty, the man who apparently decided he's too good for The Voice now." There it was, the first jab. The audience laughed, but Blake recognized that tone, half joke, half challenge. He lifted his brows. "You startin' already, Joy?" "I haven't even warmed up yet," she shot back. The laughter grew, but Blake sensed she wasn't bluffing. The other hosts attempted to steer the conversation toward safer ground, his upcoming music, his life on the ranch, his sense of humor. Blake responded with charm, throwing in jokes of his own, building rapport with the crowd. But every time Joy opened her mouth, the tension sharpened. "So tell me, Blake," she cut in at one point, leaning back in her chair, "how many days into your so-called break did you realize quitting The Voice was a mistake?" Blake blinked, then laughed, not the easy laugh he normally gave, but one laced with disbelief. "Mistake? I'm pretty sure my doctors, my wife, and my sanity all disagree with you on that one." "Aha," Joy pointed as if she'd caught him in a trap. "So you admit you quit because the job was too much for you?" He shook his head slowly. "I didn't say that at all. I said I needed a break." "Uh-huh," Joy said skeptically. Sure, a break. That's what everybody says right before they realize the younger singers outpaced them." A chorus of gasps rippled through the audience. The other hosts immediately tried to intervene. "Joy, come on now, let's not." But Joy held up a hand as if she were conducting an orchestra made of chaos. Blake's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone light. "You know, Joy, if I wanted to get roasted, I could have saved the flight, stayed home, and lit myself on fire." The audience erupted in laughter. Joy wasn't amused. "You think I'm roasting you? Sweetheart, this is me being gentle." "Oh, Lord help me," Blake muttered. Sarah Haynes jumped in with a question about his ranch life, desperate to pivot the conversation. Blake answered, his voice steady, but he could feel Joy's eyes drilling into the side of his face. She didn't interrupt, but he knew she wasn't done. When the laughter died down from his story about runaway goats, Joy struck again. "So are the goats your emotional support animals? Because leaving a successful show after so long must have left a big hole in your ego." The audience reacted in a wave of uncomfortable laughter and gasps. Even the cameraman took a step closer, sensing something explosive brewing. Blake stared at her for a moment, weighing his response. Then he leaned in, elbows on the table, expression shifting from playful to pointed. "You know what, Joy? I think everyone's ego could use a little trimming, including mine. But some folks," he gestured mildly in her direction, "might benefit from a vacation or two themselves." The audience exploded, some laughing, some shouting, "Ooh," like middle schoolers at recess. Joy's nostrils flared. "Are you implying I'm cranky?" "I'm implying you work hard," Blake said, still smiling. "Too hard." Joy narrowed her eyes. "Nice save." "It wasn't a save," Blake shrugged. "Just an observation. You've earned a break." That did it. Joy pushed her chair back slightly, crossing her arms in a stiff, offended fold. "So I should quit my job and go sit on a porch somewhere? Is that what you're saying, cowboy?" Blake lifted his coffee mug and took a steady sip. "It worked pretty well for me." The audience roared. Joy did not. "You know," she said slowly, with each word sharp as a blade, I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities on this show. Some of them come in respectful. Some come in humble. And then others. Finish that sentence, Blake dared, leaning forward, voice low but not hostile, more amused than anything. Joy inhaled, eyes locked on him. Then others come on thinking they're funnier than they actually are. Blake grinned. That's rich coming from a comedian. The studio burst into chaos, cheers, laughter, gasps, and the hosts waving their hands like referees trying to break up a fight. Okay, let's take a breath, Joy. Blake, come on, we're live, remember. But Joy wasn't hearing any of it. She rose slightly in her seat, leaning forward over the table. You want to go toe-to-toe with me, Blake? Really? Blake shrugged casually. I thought we already were. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, the studio dissolved into chaos so fast it felt like the walls themselves were vibrating. Crew members rushed out like ants from a kicked-over hill, headsets buzzing, hands waving, voices overlapping. The audience sat stunned, murmurs rising like a low hum of electricity. Several people stood, craning their necks to get a better look backstage, trying to figure out whether what they had just witnessed was scripted or a genuine implosion. Blake Shelton remained seated for a moment, still processing the shock of Joy Behar shooting up from her chair and announcing she wasn't putting up with him anymore. He took a breath, exhaling through his nose, then pinched the bridge of it briefly. Well, he muttered to no one in particular. That escalated. A producer hurried over, face pale and tense. Blake, we need to move you backstage, now. Is she coming back out? Blake asked, rising from his seat. The producer winced. Unclear. But she's, very upset. Blake shook his head, running a hand through his hair as he followed the producer off stage. Upset? It was just banter. She jabbed at me first. The producer offered a sympathetic shrug. You know Joy. She's spirited. The hallway behind the set was already in uproar. Staff darted in all directions, and someone whispered urgently into a headset, security isn't needed, just stand by. No, don't stand too close. The tension hung thick in the air, like the seconds before a thunderstorm breaks open. Down the hall, Blake could hear Joy long before he saw her. Her voice, unmistakable even through two open doors and the general din, rang out in sharp bursts. I'm not sitting next to that man again, she shouted. He comes on the show and thinks he can insult me. Absolutely not. Someone tried to interject, their voice low and soothing, but Joy cut them off instantly. Don't, Joy, calm down, me. I am calm. This is me calm. That man called me cranky. Blake raised a brow at the producer beside him. Seriously, that's what set her off. Cranky. The producer sighed. In her defense, you did strongly imply it. Blake groaned. I implied she works too much. Well, the producer cleared his throat. She heard cranky. Blake rolled his eyes. Good lord. A stagehand waved him into a small backstage lounge and shut the door behind them, leaving him momentarily insulated from the chaos. Blake sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring down at the floor. The adrenaline had fully caught up with him now, making his heart thud in his chest. He glanced at the coffee table, a half-eaten muffin, some magazines, a cup of tea someone had abandoned. He grabbed one of the bottles of water instead, twisting the cap open. She's really that mad? He asked the producer who'd followed him in. Oh, she's furious, the man replied honestly. She said, and I quote, if he's still in this building when we go back live, I'm walking off again. Blake nearly choked on his sip of water. You're kidding. I wish, said the producer. We're trying to talk her down, but she's convinced you tried to embarrass her. Blake threw a hand in the air. She embarrassed me. She said I quit my job because kids outpaced me. What was I supposed to do? Just sit there and smile like a mannequin? The producer spread his hands helplessly. Banter is fine, but Joy has certain buttons. I must have hit every one of them, Blake muttered. Another knock sounded at the door before a second, higher-ranking producer stepped inside, looking as if he'd aged 10 years since the segment started. Blake, he said urgently, we have a situation. So I've heard, Blake replied, leaning back. She wants me out of the building. The senior producer hesitated, then nodded. She says she won't go back on camera unless you're gone. Blake gave a long, incredulous laugh. You're telling me Joy Behar just gave y'all an ultimatum? Kick the country boy out or she walks. The producer pressed his lips together apologetically. Look, we value you. Truly. But Joy is, Joy. She's been here a long time. When she's upset, it becomes a network concern. Blake lifted both hands. I don't want to be the reason your show implodes. What do you want me to do? The senior producer took a breath. To defuse this quickly, the easiest solution is for you to, temporarily, leave the set.